warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Welcome to the International Lecture Series 3 2024. We are very delighted to have all of you here at this event today that will discuss about sustainable housing policy. Firstly, I would like to welcome the Head of Urban and Regional Planning Department, Professor Dr. Ingwi Wandari Handayani, STM-TMPS, and our honorable guest, Lecturer Chantalle Elisabeth Rietdijk, Ph.D. from National Taiwan University. Thank you very much for joining us in Inveted Lecture. Ms. Chantalle Elisabeth Rietdijk, Ph.D. from Program on Smart Sustainable Development and Management, National Taipei University, Taiwan, and host lecture Ibu Profesor Dr. Sunarti, and our moderator Ibu Landung Esariti, STMPS. Welcome and please happily join our event today and to our beloved lecture from Urban and Regional Planning Department, student from Bachelor and Master Program of Urban and Regional Planning Department, and everyone participating online from Zoom and YouTube channel. Before we jump to the main event, please kindly see the event agenda for today. So our agenda for today is the first one is opening, and then opening remarks from Head of Urban and Regional Planning Department, Ibu Profesor Dr. Ingwi Wandari Handayani. And then we will have a presentation from invited lecturer, Ms. Chantalle Elisabeth Rietdijk, PhD, about the development of social rental housing in the Greater Taipei region. And next, we will have a presentation from host lecturer Professor Dr. Sunarti about housing development patterns around industrial area, case study, housing around Kendal Industrial Park, Kendal Regency. And then we have discussion and conclusion. And the last is closing. It is a pleasure for us to hear an opening speech from Head of Urban and Regional Planning Department, Ibu Profesor Dr. Ingwi Wandari Handayani, STM-TMPS. The time is yours.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mbak MC. Yeah, you can hear my voice clearly?
Yes, clear.
Yes.
Okay, yeah, thank you. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Selamat pagi, good morning from Semarang. Our invited lecture series speaker, Ibu Chantalle from the National Taiwan University, Taipei University, based in Taiwan. Chantalle, nice to meet you again here in our international lecture series. My colleague, Professor Sunarti, as the host lecturer, and also the moderator, as well as the coordinator for our international lecture series program, Ibu Landung, all my colleagues and also participants who joining this lecture series. I'm very happy to open another, again, one our international lecture series, a series in our department, inviting scholars from global universities, hoping that we can give international atmosphere in our department and also broad perspective of our also all the care within the department and engineering in different topics. And I'm happy today that we have an interesting topic focusing on the settlement and the housing. And as we know, housing is a very important part, critical part in urban and regional planning. And we hope that this kind of activities that will be recorded and will be published in YouTube will give insights also not only for the one who join this lecture online, but also later on at any time, anybody can just access the YouTube, and when they want to know more about various topics related to the urban and regional development planning, then we hope that this platform can give a lot of benefits to everybody who interested in doing studies in various topics, and hoping also with our discussion today, it will lead into a more various topic on the students' final work in the either for our undergraduate students and also for our postgraduate students. So I think That's all that I would like to mention in this opening. Hope that you can join all the not only the presentation but also the discussion. And thank you again, Ibu Shanta, Prof. Sun, and Bu Landung. Selamat pagi. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you. Back to you, Mbak MC.
Okay, thank you very much for the warm welcoming remark from Ibu Profesor Dr. In Wiwandari Handayani, STMT MPS. Now it is time for the main session. I hand over this lecture to Ibu Landung as a moderator. Please welcome Ibu Landung. The time is yours.
Yeah, thank you, Ririn. Good morning, everyone. I hope you have a blessed day and still excited to join this morning lecture. Before I go to the main session, I would like firstly to introduce both speakers. The first one is Chantalle Elisabeth Rietdijk, Ph.D. She is a lecturer in National Taipei University, Taiwan. And she is actively participate in the program on smart sustainable development and management. She was graduated from Doctor of Philosophy in Urban Geography from National Taiwan Normal University, and has been in various of research, housing market, aging society, and also urban politics and development. Her talk today will concentrate on social housing with the title, The Development of Social Rental Housing in the Greater Taipei Region. And then next, we will have Prof. Sunarti as our host lecturer. And as many of we know, please jump to the next CV. Yes, Prof. Narti is a head of Urban Development Laboratory, and she is also graduated from a doctoral degree of Architecture and Urban Engineering. Her research focusing on sustainable and livable housing and settlement, as well as community empowerment. Many of her publication has been published in Scopus Index journals and related to the slum housing settlements, and she is also actively participate as head of the Forum of Housing and Settlement on the level of province in Central Java Province, and periodically, yearly, she is also appointed as a jury team for Habitat Day competition in a level of province also. So without further ado, I would like to welcome the first presenter, our honorable lecturer. Please, Chantalle Elisabeth Rietdijk, Ph.D., to start your presentation. You have 45 minutes. Thank you.
Let me share my screen first. This one. So I think everyone can see my screen now.
Yes.
Yes, correct?
Yes.
Okay, thank
Yes.
you very much. First of all, I would like to express my gratitude for being invited to give this lecture today to all the students and other interested guests at University Diponegoro. Especially my gratitude goes to Landung as the MC, Professor Sunarti, and Professor Wiebe, of course. Today, what I'm going to introduce to you is the development of the social rental housing in Taipei City. And I think it's an interesting case to see because we can see the challenges that arise in Taiwan concerning housing that are related to the political and social organization of the country. The contents of today's lecture are first a little bit of background information, then I will introduce Taipei City's housing market, then the path towards a social housing policy, the development of the policy, then the implementation, and then point 5, I will relate to social Sustainable Development Goal 11 and share some of my results of my research and a very short conclusion. First, maybe a little bit of a reminder, where is Taiwan located? Well, you can see here Indonesia in the south, and just go up north and you will find Taiwan. Most of the time categorized as East Asia, and one of the 6 like little tigers, developing economies. In Taiwan, you can actually see that Taipei is located at the most northern part. Before we started this lecture, we were discussing about the weather that we see now, and Taipei can be seen as a subtropical climate. Taipei city is outlined by the yellow contour, and you can see that actually it's surrounded by hills and mountains on 360 degrees around the cities. In the north, there is a dormant volcano that is goes up to 1,200 meters, and in the south there is here you can see actually is like the reservoir that is having all the water for all of Taipei. In total, Taipei city is actually not the biggest city. It's actually New Taipei city, which is surrounding Taipei city. So on the left side, on the west side of Taipei, is New Taipei cities, and together we call this the Greater Taipei region, which consists of about 7 million residents. Taipei City's housing market. Well, let's have a look. Maybe you're not familiar with what the city looks like. So I included some photos that I took. On the left, you can see the typical walk-up buildings, as we call them, walk-up buildings. And these walk-up buildings have no elevators and are all about between 30 and 40 years old. And they consist of 70% of all the buildings in Taipei. Yeah, and one of the reasons why we see this development pattern is because we have the hills surrounding Taipei, hills and mountains, and the land availability make that we go up. Yeah, so that's why we have higher buildings. So we can see that we are dealing with aging housing stock in Taiwan, because the buildings are really all in need of regeneration. Then what does Taipei City's housing market look like? As you can see in the figure outlined by the green box, the self-owned or the home ownership rate is really high. It's about 83%, 84, 83%. And the rental market is only about 9%. And in this rental market, 8% is about for the private rental market, and social rental housing at this moment is about 1.6, 1.8. So this distinct homeowner society is due to cultural preferences of Taiwanese for ownership, but also a result of the stimulation measures that the government was implementing through the 1960s to the 2000s, with a lot of subsidies for developers and first-time homeowners. What we see in Taipei, though, is that the household registration is often kept in other cities in Taiwan, while people reside in what we call like the big, large black rental market. So actually it's not really sure how many people actually live in Taipei because they are registered in other cities. Then if we go to the housing price to income ratio, it's really high. So housing price to income ratio is outlining if you spend all your income on housing, on your mortgage, and you don't spend anything else on living, like food or things like that. So how many years do you need to pay off? And this is actually about 15 to 16 years in Taipei, and just slightly lower in New Taipei City. And what is very distinct in Taiwan is that the mortgage burden is very high. So in Taipei, about the average is that households pay about 64% of their income every month towards the mortgage. Yeah, so it really indicates, these two figures, how high the housing prices for purchase are in the area. On the contrary, the rental yield is very low. Yeah, so actually, if practices such as buy to let, we just don't see that because it's not profitable. Yeah, so if you consider the housing prices, in relation to the rental prices are quite low in Taiwan. If we look at a history, in the past, the housing price to income ratio has always been high. But in 2008, with the global financial crisis, Taiwan was actually not hit that much, not that hard. But what did happen is that a lot of overseas Chinese, so Chinese living outside of Taiwan, especially in the United States, due to this global economic crisis, they brought back their money to Taiwan and invested in property. So whilst we saw in 2008 that there was economic downturn and a lot of households, losing jobs, things like that, the housing prices steeply went up. So you can imagine that at that time, people were quite angry and we saw a lot of protests happening. So these protests already started much earlier. In 1989 was the first time that we saw protests concerning, the housing prices. And in 1989, one specific movement started and they called themselves the snails without shells. Yeah, so if you can see the picture on the left is a man wearing like one of these snails with like his home on his back and indicating we are all snails, but we don't have shells, we don't have homes. But due to this global economic crisis in 2010, these protests erupted. Yeah, and people came together, and actually in the years after, we saw continuously protests of people, for example, laying down on the street, indicating we don't even have a small place to just rest, to have a bed. Yeah? And they specifically targeted the most expensive areas in the city. So they would have these protests in, we call it Renailu, one of the most expensive housing price areas in Taipei. So at this time, the government already thought, well, we might need some kind of policy, but it's hard to overcome, the elections and sort of the burden, because 80% of the people are homeowners and they don't necessarily want change. They like that the housing prices keep going up as it's their investment. But there's another factor that is influencing why the Taiwan government in the end decided that a new housing policy was needed, and that is Taiwan's fertility rate. I guess in Indonesia still like much higher, but in Taiwan, on average, every woman gets less than the replacement rate, which is considered to be 1.2 children. It's actually in the year 2022, 0.87. So you can actually know that since the year 2020, we already see a declining population in Taiwan. So we are a country where the population is not growing, but is actually declining and aging in a fast way. So this fertility rate is one of the reasons that the Taiwanese government is actually thinking, is there a correlation between the high housing prices and the low fertility rate? So a lot of research has been done. So I outlined here one of the researchers by a colleague that is actually about the role of home ownership in Taiwan's low fertility story. And they do observe a relationship which is not necessarily in home ownership and the fertility per se, but mostly about the pattern of marriage. Yeah. In Taiwan, the tradition requires to buy a house before you get married. Yeah. But since the housing prices are so high and young people cannot afford, they delay this whole process. And this is something that we see in many countries around the world. Just some examples, and Taiwan actually really follows this trend. So we have a high housing price, a very low fertility, which is making it difficult for Taiwan in the future to make their economic growth stable, or at least keep growing. So this was sort of mentioned as the justification for a change in policy. Yeah. So in the past in Taiwan, there was always only a focus on ownership. Yeah. So subsidies for ownership and subsidy for developers to construct more properties. But the government was thinking maybe we need something else. Maybe we need something that focuses on a rental approach. So I'd like to progress to the third part, which is explaining how this process of developing the social rental housing policy worked in Taiwan. So what actually happened is that the initiative didn't came from the government per se. there was several groups. The most distinct one was the Tsui Mama Foundation for Housing and Community Services, which is a rental agency focusing on low-income households and disadvantaged households. And then in the middle, you can see ours, which is the Organization of Urban REEs, is what they call. They're mostly concerned about urban development, and they consist of academics and social activists that say we need different way of looking at urban development than from just like a land monetization perspective. And together with numerous social welfare organizations, such as the organizations for people with disabilities or the homeless organization, they formed the Social Housing Advocacy Consortium. And this social housing advocacy consortium, they started to invite foreign scholars to come to Taiwan to show what is a social housing policy, because it's something in Taiwan people had no idea about. They had no idea what would be social housing. So what happened is that we see a process of international policy transfer taking place. So it started in 2011 with a visit of various scholars from different countries. So there was an international social housing conference organized by this social housing advocacy group. And they invited scholars from the Netherlands, from the United States, Denmark, Germany, Japan, and South Korea to tell about what does social housing look like in their country and how do they organize it. In the year after, it was only focusing on the Dutch housing case. And this is primarily due to the willingness of the Dutch scholars to share everything with the Taiwanese. They were really willing to build a personal relation as well. So what we saw that is in 2012, we have the Dutch Social Housing Conference in Taipei. Yeah, so not in the Netherlands, but in Taipei. In the years after, we can see in 2015, 17, and 19, the Dutch institutions train key government officials in Taipei City. So various exchanges took place. And for example, in 2011 and 2018, city mayors from various cities in Taiwan visited Amsterdam. Yeah. So what we see is this exchange going on. But what we know from policy transfer, international policy transfer, is that unsimilar systems, political systems, economic systems, most of the time only serve as an inspiration. And that's also what we see in this case. The Dutch case was really an inspirational case. This also has to do with Taiwan as an East Asian developmental state, still actually inhabiting quite a lot of like post-colonial thinking and looking towards Western countries for their policy. But of course, they realized that in the implementation phase, the Dutch case is so different that in the implementation phase, they actually looked at South Korea because is much closer to the same development issues, such as a large homeowner society and much more high-rise buildings instead of landed houses. This made that in 2016, the Housing Act that was actually not touched for more than 50 years was established and adjusted to actually make sure that social housing is possible. Yeah, so they felt inspired to make it like a pilot project. So the pilot project is about building 120,000 newly constructed units for rental, and the sublease or managed units from the private sector, so managed by the government, for people to rent. Yeah, and in this picture, I would like to outline that the family with the 2 children, that's not a coincidence. Yeah, it's really the government wants to see this as the perfect picture. So it's go back from only having 1 child or maybe even no children towards a family with 2 children to address the fertility issue. So how did we implement this policy? Because to construct 120,000 new units, that's quite a big task and also very costly. Well, I must say that the 120,000 newly constructed units are not only in the greater Taipei region. but most of them will be, because the housing issue is mostly concentrated in actually the capital. So how is the implementation going? Well, first of all, we have to see who are involved. So it is a national policy, the social housing policy. It's not a policy that is constructed through local governments. So on the national level, we have a housing and urban regeneration center setting the targets for each city. So say like, okay, Taipei City has to construct this many social housing units, New Taipei City this many, and maybe in the south all the way Kaohsiung this many. And then it's actually handed over to the local governments to do the implementation. So it's a very decentralized system where cities have to come up with their own way of development. So we can see that in Taipei and in New Taipei City, there's actually a different type of development. Yeah, so in Taipei, we always say like, okay, Taipei has the money, but they don't have space. And New Taipei City has the land available, but they lack the resources. Yeah. So there's like disadvantages to this system as well, because the money and the land is not evenly distributed. On the map on the side, you can see up on this point, up until today, which social housing projects are already concluded. And as you might see, is that they are not in the city center, exactly the city center, but you can see that they are also not very far away from the city center. Yeah. So what we see, there is a huge focus on transit-oriented development. So the social housing, what the government wants to avoid is that they are in distant places. Yeah, because we often see that affordable housing is being developed in places with low land values, further away from the city center, which actually increases the burden of transportation costs for the already low income groups. So what we see is that the government is actually implementing the social housing in combination with their transportation. So Taipei and New Taipei City have an extensive MRT network, metro, and they try to plan the social housing as a sort of like living hub. So you have your transportation. The story that's always been told is like, you can live in the social housing as a young couple with a child. In the morning, you bring your child to the childcare, which is in the same building. Then you can take the MRT to your work. In the evening, you come back by MRT. You can pick up your child from childcare. You can go to the supermarket, which is in the basement of the building, and then go back to your home, which is on top. Yeah, but I would say the positive is that these developments are really well connected. Yeah, so really not adding towards extra costs in terms of transportation. And we see different developments as well. So we have the 100% government funded projects, which later I will share why that is a little bit, well, difficult to achieve affordable housing. And then we have the PPP, so the public-private partnerships. Yeah. So one of the things that for public-private partnerships works is that they increase the floor area ratio in the specific development area by 30%, whereby 15% is given back to the government to provide, for example, social housing or other welfare services, and 15% is actually giving to the developer if they, well, say like, okay, we are going to construct this development in a relationship with the government, provide social housing. So the idea is that this hub really sort of uplifts the whole neighborhood as well. Then what does it look like? There is a great emphasis on quality, smart applications, earthquake resistance, green buildings. So just some pictures from the inside and the outside. Some more. So on the left, you can see, for example, the smart applications that show like the weather, how much energy is used in the building. And also, for example, some information like messages will be displayed there. Otherwise, well, I think nicely equipped. And on the right side, you can see what, for example, one of those houses would look like. So this is the 3-bedroom apartment. And one of the things that you can see is like 2 bathrooms. Yeah, and this is some of the things that are outlined by a lot of social activists that say the social housing is due to lack of experience modeled after private housing. Yeah, so it just looks exactly like if you would buy a new apartment. But the double bathroom, is that really necessary? Yeah, so it's something that in the beginning years of the social housing policy, we can really see that there was a lack of experience with how do you, well, make social housing. Then the implementation phase. So who can live in social housing? One of the things that we have to take into account first is that only those that cannot own property in the north of Taiwan. Yeah. If you or your family members where you live with now own property, you cannot live in the social housing. But there are, of course, some priority groups indicated that will, well, maybe benefit more from living in the social housing. So priority groups would be single parents, low income households, indigenous households, families with more than 3 children is an incentive to get that third one. Yeah, 3 or more. And then people with mental or physical disabilities. Yeah, and in the discussion phase, so when they were still thinking about the social housing policy, we only see the inclusion of 5% for priority groups. How come? A lot of scholars in Taiwan, they are all trained in the United States. So they had this idea of social housing as low-income ghettos, something where low-income people concentrate. And they were very afraid that this would not be accepted. We get a huge NIMBY effect from society. But after consideration and seeing the examples from different countries in the world where actually ghettos don't exist in social housing projects, in the Housing Act in 2017 was implemented, they chose to first go for 30% of allocation of all the social housing units to one of these priority groups. And in 2021, after they saw that, well, we don't see a huge NIMBY effect, we don't see a concentration of low income people or people with other disadvantages having a negative input on the neighborhoods, they raised it to 40%. So what does it look like? In one of my research projects, I looked at specifically 6 different social housing projects. And in terms of distribution, you can see there is a focus on 1-bedroom or studio apartments in all of the social housing units, which is units for youth, people that just graduated from university and now have no place to go, or single households. But in the allocation, I think that's more interesting to see, is we can see that we have low income groups, we have disadvantaged groups, but basically the priority group and then the general group. Yeah. One of the other things that has been done, because I told before that actually Taiwan has a big regeneration issue, a lot of old properties. So what they try to do is to combine social housing with regeneration efforts. So for example, in the outlined red box, you can see that in this social housing project, 153 of the households were like the housing units was reserved for the people that were actually living in the area that had to make place for the social housing. So they try to reserve a certain portion of the social housing for people to move temporarily to while their housing is being regenerated. In New Taipei City, so the 2 green ones outlined here is actually have a different priority. So we see a different priority between Taipei City and New Taipei City, and that has to do with the political party in power. So at this time in New Taipei City, we had the Kuomintang, which is the political party that has more votes from higher income groups that own property. So they had to find a way. So how can we make the social housing be accepted? We don't want to focus too much on low income groups. So they said we want to focus on youth. Yeah, so you can see a specific focus on a lot of allocation towards youth between 20 and 41 years old to provide for younger people. Lastly, about the implementation is we see that it's also combined with some social impact. So for example, there is the Social Housing Youth Innovation Project, where people that are just graduated are actually prioritized in the social housing if they give something back to society. So we have, for example, community gardens where people help to give back, to do some gardening workshops with the residents, and not only with the residents, but also with the people living in the surrounding areas of the social housing project. So it's not only focusing on the project itself, but also really trying to incorporate the whole neighborhood. Then we come to my research part, because for now I gave you a little bit of a idea about what does it look like, how it's implemented. But two questions that I was concerned with was, how affordable is the Greater Taipei social housing for various income groups? And also, how does the social housing policy actually contribute to housing justice in Greater Taipei? So firstly, if we go to Sustainable Development Goal 11 about adequate affordable housing, so I was primarily concerned with affordable housing. So how affordable is it? Yeah. Adequate, I think from the pictures that you saw, we can say that it's actually quite luxury. So that was one of the parts that I didn't want to focus on, but more on the affordability component. And I looked at 6 different projects that I already outlined a little bit earlier in the presentation when we discussed about distribution and allocation. So 4 projects in Taipei City and 2 in New Taipei City. So that New Taipei City, the green ones. And I just looked at the very most simple way how you can evaluate affordability. A lot of comments on why not to use this, but I still did it. So the monthly rent, or you can also look at the mortgage payment, but in my case, it was rent, divided by the monthly income, and then you get the rental price to income ratio. And well, for a long time, 30% was sort of considered the maximum of what is affordable if you spend every 1 month 30% of your income on housing. But nowadays, we actually see that this percentage is being brought up to be maybe about 35 to 40%. So if we look at these 6 housing projects, and what I outlined, maybe let's go here first, is we had 5 different income groups. Yeah, so on the bottom of the graph, you can see 1, 2, lower 3, higher 3, and general. So number 1 is the lowest income groups. Yeah, the lowest income groups, which is really the bare minimum in Taiwan. Then in general, we have average income. So all the way on the right side is general income. And I had the 6 projects and calculated, so what is the most expensive social housing project and the cheapest one, and then for 1-bedroom or studio apartments, 2-bedroom apartments, and 3-bedroom apartments. And what we see is that if you take the 30% as, that is what is affordable, then for the lowest income groups at number 1, the 3-bedroom apartments are very, very far from what is affordable for them to rent. And only some of the projects have studio or 1-bed apartments that are actually affordable for them. So that's in this side. If we go to the other side, to the average income, we can see that, they benefit if you have, for example, a studio and you are average income, then you only pay maybe about 10 to 15% of your monthly income towards rent in the social housing. Whereas maybe some of the 3-bedroom apartments are still, if you raise it to 40%, it would be achievable, but otherwise still quite expensive. So why is this important? Why is this a problem? Yeah, one of the problems that we can see from here is that, the social housing policy is benefiting not necessarily the low income ones, but much more the average income groups. Yeah, so you can say okay, how social is the social housing? On the other hand, one of the issues that we see in the graph is that the difference between average and median income. So in Taipei City, the median income is only at half of average income, which means in Taipei, we have a lot of very wealthy individuals that are actually earning millions. But the housing policy is based on average incomes and not on median incomes. So as a result, we can see that people that are, let's say, above median income towards general income, those are the ones benefiting mostly from the social housing. Yeah, in Taipei City, it's a little bit closer, but still there's a huge gap between average and mean income. So what I looked at is I wanted to see if we have the private market, the private rental market, and we have these 2 groups. Yeah? On the one end, the lower income ones, and on the other end, we have the between median and average income groups, and what is available on the private markets. So if we look at the private market in, like, let's say a 1 kilometer radius from the social housing projects, for general households, so median to average income, we can see that there's actually, well, for studios, 3-bedroom apartments, there is actually cheaper, same, and higher price options in the private market. Yeah. Whereas if you look on the next column, so the private market in the 1 kilometer radius for, well, priority 2, there's nothing cheaper. Yeah. So in a sense, you can say, well, if you are a general household, there's also options for you in the private rental market. So why would you need to be in the social housing? But we see that this group loves the social housing. Why? Because it is new and it's big and it's luxurious. Yeah. So if we see, like, okay, we have adequacy and affordability, we actually see that the social rental housing is, yeah, depending on where you're from, quite affordable or not. Yeah. But the adequacy is really, it's built according to the latest standards, structural safety, facility for disabled persons, for example. But if we look at the private rental market, yeah, the affordability is quite similar for higher income groups. Yeah, for median income groups, the private markets also provide cheaper or same price options. Yeah, and the low income groups, well, have same price options, but it's much smaller. Whereas the adequacy, due to the housing being aged, is much lower. Yeah. So we see that actually this group of median to average income is taking up a huge part in the social housing nowadays. Yeah, because they prefer it's a nicer living experience. So this brings me to the housing justice question. Yeah. So if we go basically back towards what does a house provide? What is a house? Yeah. We could say it's a shelter, it's security, but it's also something that provides you social status. Yeah. It has something to do with control and autonomy. If you're looking at ownership, you can change things in your house. Whereas if you are a renter in Taiwan in the private market, you have nothing to say. Actually, the landlord can kick you out at any moment. Yeah. And then there's the economic advantage or disadvantage that comes with a house, owning a house. Yeah? So this is basically the dilemma between home ownership versus rental. So if we look at housing, it's at the same time a human right, yeah, as acknowledged by the United Nations in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Whereas at the other side, it's a market commodity, something that can be traded in the free market. It can be an investment and it can be traded for profits. Yeah, and this is the contradictory. So we have the product that you can buy and invest it in, which is regulated by the market. But on the other hand, we see in Taiwan specifically that the market does not provide when no profit can be made. So for low income households, there's no options provided. So it's always like a skill, right? So we have a balance. Yeah, is it more like a human right or more like a housing commodity? Yeah, and it has to do with the ideology towards housing. So I included a quote by Rakov, very old, and he says, in the ideology of everyday life, the meaning of the house, that actually the house is a cultural object. Yeah, developers, investors, residents, they all have an idea of what a house is and should be. So it's influenced by a social process. And this is something that we see in Taiwan as well. So if we look at the idea or the set of beliefs or principles associated with housing in Taiwan, then we can see that, well, there are actually a lot of proverbs on housing. So for example, we have residents own a house, indicating if you don't own a house, you are not a resident. Yeah, you don't have this status. Or as one of the important things in life, well, have land and it brings wealth. Yeah, if you don't have land, you will never get wealth. Yeah, and the start from the family. So if you have a peaceful house, you will have good business. Yeah, so everything's starting from the house. So what we see in a lot of East Asian societies is that stability is preferred over moving. If you buy a house, it's for the rest of your life. Yeah, whereas in other countries you see much more housing patterns where people move between houses. And well, ownership is a way to achieve such stability in life. Yeah. So in Taiwan, we see actually that the house is at the core of determining if someone is successful or not. Yeah. And the main ideology is thus related to that as well. And on the other hand, if we simply try to explain it through economics, it would be like, okay, if there's more demand, an increase in demand, then we have a price increase, simple explanation. But the supply cannot keep up with demand. That's one of the reasons why we can have high housing prices, or the private market does not provide for unprofitable cases. So the short explanation would be like that. So in Taiwan, we have a limited land availability due to the basin. So Taipei is in the basin and we cannot go beyond. And we also have the concentration of job opportunities just in Taipei. So for example, this contributes to a lot of migration, domestic migration towards the capital. But on the other hand, we see something like a high vacancy rate in Taipei City. A lot of investments, where no one is living. So empty houses. So it's sort of like a paradox that we observe. So mostly, again, it's about what is the ideology. So in Taiwan, one of the most profitable cases to make money is actually through housing. A lot of speculation going on there. So what we see is that housing is an investment instead of a home. And we sometimes refer to it as we have a property owning democracy. Nowadays, there is a lot of, let's say, regulations in place to make it, to sort of make this behavior go away. But still the taxes are way too low, because you have to keep in mind, Taiwan is a homeowner society. If 80% of the people that can vote own a house, then you don't want to touch that as a political party to make, for example, the housing tax go up. So what we see is, what I wanted to do is to see like, okay, if we look at the dominant discourse in society, I did interviews and I looked at documents, for example, the election programs. I interviewed city councillors, I interviewed government professionals, and I looked at urban policy documents to find out, so how do people see social housing? What is the main discourse that we see? And one of them that came up is that social housing is seen as a temporary solution. So for young people, they just graduated, they have to save before they can buy a house. They can live in social housing. And then after 6 years living in social housing, which is the limit for the general population, they can buy a house. But if we go back to actually, which groups can profit, then you're talking about the general groups from the median towards the average income. For them, it might be true. You can live in the social housing until you actually have saved enough to buy your house. But for low income groups, this of course doesn't make sense. They can never save enough money while living in social housing, because they're already spending sometimes even up to 50% of their income for renting. So this temporary solution reflects the narrative that's actually still common in Taiwan, which is the focus on ownership. So how come this focus on ownership is so intense in Taiwan? Well, just some theory, not from me. So welfare regimes that we observe in different types of countries. So for example, if you have a welfare regime that's very liberal, you can see a lot of commodification, you see a lot of stratification, and the markets will be the main welfare provider, for example, through privatized healthcare. In Taiwan and a lot of East Asian tiger countries, developmental countries, welfare is provided through asset-based welfare. So basically what we see in this asset-based welfare provision is that we see high commodification, but not necessarily high stratification. We see a dominant provider that is actually the family, the state, the market. So it doesn't really fit this table. So what we see is actually that we have asset-based welfare provision through home ownership in the developmental state, which is Taiwan. And we see housing assets becoming such like an insurance. Your property, or if you maybe if you have the option to invest in various objects, properties, they become your insurance when you retire or when something bad happens to your family. You can sell one house and you have an investment back. You have the money back to deal with the situation. So we see housing assets becoming much more like an insurance instead of becoming a home to live in. And through the rising housing prices that we observe in all the countries around the world in many areas, yeah, especially capital cities, is actually it's one of the best insurances, the best investments that you can actually do. Yeah. This is very contrary to, for example, the Netherlands that I spoke about before, where we see more like a universal social security and welfare policies, as in social democratic countries, where we see housing assets really much more uncoupled from retirement money, which are much more provided through pensions, for example. Yeah. So this brings me to the conclusion of my talk. I would say in Taiwan, the social housing policy, first of all, there are many challenges that remain for achieving housing justice in the Greater Taipei region due to the persisting narrative on ownership and housing as a commodity. Yeah. So the social rental housing is not necessarily addressing the root of the problem, which is the narrative around housing and the speculation that has been done and the investment in multiple properties as insurance. But on the other hand, the social rental housing provides high quality, yeah, not necessarily affordable, but to certain groups it is, as an alternative. Yeah, it's an alternative to the private rental market. And lastly, social rental housing is basically the only accepted policy related to housing in Taiwan's property owning democracy, because politicians cannot, well, if they want to be re-elected, they basically cannot raise housing taxes, for example, or address the speculation in the market too much, because we have 80% of the people actually owning property. Yeah, and they will not vote again for these politicians that implement such policies. So the social housing, rental housing, is basically not threatening for people that own housing. So that's why the social housing is sort of like the only accepted policy at this time in Taiwan. This is it for now. I hope you had a nice, well, sort of overview of what the social rental housing policy looks like in Taiwan. And I'm looking forward to hearing the other presentation of today. And then I think after that, we will have a Q&A session. So for now, I would like to leave it here. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Chantalle. I really enjoy your presentation.
Mm-hmm.
To be honest, I have also researching on social housing. I had the earlier year of doing my master.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say that I could not agree more on the perception that a house is influenced by culture, because we have also the same here.
Mm-hmm.
I would say that housing still seen as a commodity. So it is the same with what have experienced by Taiwanese community, that welfare is based on assets, and that housing pretty much determine the social status and economic level of the community. So yeah, so this is very important. I think that all the participants here will have much more question, and I will leave it back at the question and answer session. And now I welcome Prof. Narti to give presentation. And this is quite interesting because by Chantalle, Rietdijk Ph.D., we have talked about the social housing, and Prof. Narti will talk more on housing for industrial workers in Kendal Regency. Please welcome Prof. Narti.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Landung, Ms. Chantalle. I can try share my PPT.
Yes, please.
You can see my PPT. It's clear?
Yes, clear, Prof. Yes.
Okay. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good morning for all participants. Thank you for the opportunity given to me. Right now, I would like to present my research experience on housing development pattern around industrial areas. A case study in housing around Kendal Industrial Park, Kendal Regency, Central Java Province. This is my CV in brief. Sorry, and yeah, and continue it again. This is in my CV in brief. Focus my research about sustainable and livable housing and settlement and community empowerment. There a slide about these outlines. Yeah, introduction, research, location and method, housing development around Kendal Industrial Park, or we call KIP, and housing development pattern around KIP, impact housing development pattern around KIP, and alternative strategies for housing development around industrial areas. Based on previous research, that is, the increase in urban population is a global issue that has implication for increasing land use, especially housing. The need for housing and supporting infrastructure is increasing rapidly in certain areas with economic potential, such as industrial areas. However, housing is often not allocated according to need to support industrial areas. The lack of regulation and control has resulted in housing developments around industrial areas tending to irregular, not fully up to standard, and to the point of slum. This problem has become an important housing issue to pay attention to. The key point is the issue of housing development around industrial areas, which is irregular, not fully up to standard, and slum is clearly contrary to the concept of livable housing. Livability should be a foundation for housing development because it includes healthy, safe, cohesive society and inclusive, sustainable and accessible housing. Furthermore, the concept of livable housing is increasingly urgent around industrial areas. The livability aspect is related to the interaction between human and the housing environment to achieve a good quality of life for the long term. Thus, limited urban land use and the rapid development of housing around industrial areas require implementation of livable housing to prevent irregularities and environmental impact. As a case study, this problem occurs in the industrial areas of Central Java Province, specifically Kendal Industrial Park, we call KIP, where housing environment tends to grow rapidly, uncontrolled, unhealthy, began to slum. Based on the urgency and problem, the research aimed to analyze livable housing around industrial areas based on housing development pattern around industrial areas. In terms of location, based on regional spatial planning, Kendal Regency has an industrial area around 5,109 hectares. The research focused on housing in the Brangsong district, Kaliwungu district, and South Kaliwungu district, which are adjacent to and surrounding KIP. You can see the picture on the right about 3 district and position location industrial area about 2 until 3 kilometers from KIP. Specifically about the KIP, KIP is one of the center of economic growth in Central Java. Since 2012, the industrial area built is 582.13 hectares, or 61%. Based on the first phase master plan, Land use in the KIP includes industrial, commercial, infrastructure, and open space. However, after KIP became a special economic zone, housing provision will be carried in the second phase for the middle up group. This means that there is a demand to fulfill housing needs for workers outside industrial areas. The research used quantitative method based on theory and studies that have been conducted. Secondary data was collected through document studies about housing, image interpretation, and primary data was collected through observation activities and questionnaires to 100 respondents in 3 sub-districts, as well as interview with KIP manager and the relevant stakeholders. Then data validation uses the triangulation approach and data analysis using descriptive, spatial, and experimental analysis. The first discussed regarding housing development around KIP. This is housing around KIP as a total area of 1,321 hectares with a dominance of 87% being self-help housing. You can see in the picture on the right, yellow indicates self-help housing and orange indicate housing by developer. Housing development tend to spread along the road network with the center of density around KIP. When compared with the Kendal Regency Regional Spatial Plan, 100% of existing housing around KIP is in accordance with the spatial plan. You can see a picture on the right too. There are still around 2,942 hectares or 54% of land designated for housing. However, the rapid development of housing must be anticipated through policies and planning so that housing is available. Based on field observation, housing by developers and self-help housing has different characteristics. Housing by developers tends to be uniform with plot areas, 30 to 60 square meters, and well-planned. Infrastructure and facilities has also been provided by the developer so that there is more mixed use. You can see about the road network about 2.5 meters, drainage 0.2 until 0.3 meters, and access to waste management, and electricity and clean water is available, and there are trading facilities and workshop facilities. This manual about self-help housing tend to have different plot areas of 65 to 100. So it is less regular. Building conditions are also adapt to individual capabilities. You can see in the picture on the right, landed house, permanent and non-permanent building condition. Building material are made of brick, wood, bamboo, or a combination of these materials, depending on the individual economic characters. People's habits often gather with network. In terms of infrastructure, in self-help housing, a small part of the infrastructure is not up to standard, such as roads only 1 meter and natural drainage. There are no integrated waste bins, and not every self-help housing has educational, health, and economic facilities. The image shows the physical condition in infrastructure and facilities in self-help housing around KIP. You can see about the educational facilities, worship, track, field that can be used the development of certain function. There are good roads, but there are still damaged roads and environmental drainage and waste in housing around. Even though the housing around KIP has a different plot area, however, the characteristics of the community are dominated by one head of family with four family members, and 70% of the house in use residents will maintaining the original shape of the building. This is still accordance with the comfort standard of 1%, 9 square meters. Furthermore, 55% of communities do not have activities to maintain the security of their environment. However, 89% of communities still have high enough awareness to care for their homes to join community service activities. Thus, housing around KIP still doesn't fully have facilities or activities to maintain security that should be made to achieve livable housing. This is the next discussion regarding housing development patterns around KIP. After the operation of KIP, housing development around KIP increased to 74.28 hectares in the period 2016 to 2022, with housing dominated by developers of about 59.5 hectares or 80%. The increase in housing is shown in red in the picture on the right. There are three patterns, namely rapid housing development heading towards the southern part of the area approaching Semarang city, and medium housing development around KIP and lead to the center of Kendal Regency, and slow housing development around the existing industrial area. The first rapid housing development that is leading to the city of Semarang is caused by the housing market in the Kendal Regency doesn't only target KIP workers, but also workers in Semarang city. Why Semarang city? You can see in the city Semarang. In Semarang city, border directly on Kendal Regency, which is connected by the national road and toll road. Semarang city is the center of government and activities in Central Java province, with the fourth highest population. Even the western part of Semarang city, which border the KIP, also has a main function as an industrial area, which is also a big economic attraction beside a KIP. You can see the picture in the left, condition Semarang and Kendal Regency. Furthermore, the regional minimum wage for Semarang city is higher than Kendal Regency, but the price range for the land and housing by developers in Kendal Regency is lower than in Semarang city. In fact, price is the main consideration of industrial workers in choosing a house. It can be said that Semarang city has economic attractiveness and complexity of facilities or activities, but limited land and high land price result in development in bordering regencies, including around KIP, Kendal Regency. As a result, housing around KIP is also occupied by workers in Semarang. Even from the questionnaire, 14% of respondents work as industrial. However, the majority of industrial workers are workers in the Semarang city industrial area. This is about the part of rapid housing development. There are also medium and slow housing development patterns, namely approaching Kendal Industrial Park and the existing industrial area. The research found that medium and slow housing development is caused by the things like 67% of the community live in housing over 10 years before KIP existed. And 51% of the community live in housing due to parental inheritance. This is also in line with the fact that 67% of the communities assess that KIP has not a significant impact on housing activities around KIP. So related to the previous discussion, rapid housing development around industrial area still tend to be influenced by external factors. Besides that, because KIP has only been operational for less than 10 years, development around KIP are still not significant. There's still discussion medium and slow housing development. Housing development to the north and around existing industrial is also limited due to area designated for industrial and agriculture areas. However, an important point to note is that Kendal Regency doesn't have yet a control or restriction of use around industrial area, which is difficult to put a brake on uncontrolled housing development. This medium and slow housing development can turn to rapid housing development, which must be anticipated. The next slide about is a discussion of the impact of housing development pattern around the KIP. Based on the gap analysis of transportation facilities services, public transportation, shuttle and bus only pass through national road. Apart from that, the national road that connect KIP with housing is not equipped with a safe crossing pedestrian access road. It shows that not all housing around KIP is served by public transportation. You can see on the right about this condition in Kendal Regency. Types of transportation used by the community around KIP: walk, two-wheel private vehicle, four-wheel private vehicle, and public transportation and bicycle. Communities tend to use two-wheel private vehicle for work and daily activities. You can show in the picture on the right. And the high intensity use private vehicle causes impact such as a traffic jam and pollution. The communities use public transportation. Transportation is still low, and some people use bicycle for transportation to work, daily activities, and to the other area outside the district. Four-wheel vehicle are the lowest because the are considered less fast to get somewhere. Another impact, the distribution of self-help housing around KIP in 9 villages is included in the slum categories because it is not equipped with facilities that meet standards. However, 3 of these villages have received a slum area improvement program. However, you can mean that handling slum must be a concern to achieve livable housing around industrial area. You can see the map. Green box has received a slum upgrading program, and the red box haven't received the slum upgrading program yet. The next is a discussion regarding alternative strategies for housing development around industrial area. In summary, the problem and impact of housing development around industrial area are shown on the diagram. The housing development problem include the housing market target around industrial doesn't only target industrial workers. Rapid housing development around industrial areas. Housing development has uncontrolled even before the existence of industrial areas. and there is no control or restriction of use around industrial areas. This problem then has an impact on slum problems, urban sprawl phenomenon, gap in affordability of housing facility services, and the high traffic flow causes traffic jam and pollution. This problem and impact are contrary to the theory of housing and livable housing. These alternative strategies are needed in accordance with the livable housing concept that can respond to problem and impact. This is still connected to the previous slide. By considering the impact of housing development around industrial and livable housing theory, it was found that there are 4 things that can be alternative strategies. The first, to overcome slums, it must refer to housing theory, which must meet the aspect of decent, healthy, safe, and comfortable. So handling existing housing problem strategy is needed that addresses this aspect. The second, to overcome the urban sprawl phenomenon related to gaps in housing facilities and traffic problems. It must refer to the theory that housing around industrial must be affordable for workers at least 2 kilometers, as well as the affordability of facilities and access to transportation. There's a strategy needed in increasing access to affordable housing facilities. Lastly, the important point for livable housing is that you must also consider environmental sustainability. Thus, for the future, strategies needed such as physical planning and control policies to anticipate housing development, as well as provision of decent, affordable, and sustainable housing are needed. Moreover, if the location of around industrial, then it must also consider affordability to industry and the suitability of the housing market concept. You can see a diagram in the slide. In detail, the livable housing strategy around industrial area is explained as follows. First, handling existing problem can be done through improving the quality of housing and housing infrastructure, as well as improving the quality of life of the community. The second, increasing access to affordable housing facilities can be done improve access and means of public transportation, as well as improve access for pedestrian and bicycle users. The third, physical planning and control policies to anticipate housing development can be done through arrangement of housing structure and plan for the provision of basic infrastructure according to technical standard, as well as control of housing around industrial area. Lastly, for sustainability, provision of decent, affordable, and sustainable housing can be done through flat, especially for industrial workers, as well as alternative to landed house with maybe with panel system. So this discussion has not specifically discussed its strategy, but an important input is that the development of industrial area is also related to the development of housing around industrial, which must be compact and integrated, so that it doesn't only focus on the internal area. This requires the support of local government and related stakeholders. That's about for this conclusion. Housing development pattern around Kendal Industrial Park, Kendal Regency divided into 3 patterns. Rapid housing development toward the certain part of the area approaching Semarang City, medium housing development around Kip and towards the center of Kendal Regency, and slow housing development around existing industrial use areas. Impact of housing development around industrial area are urban sprawl phenomenon, gap in affordability of housing facility services, high traffic flow which causes traffic jam and pollution, and slum housing problems. Therefore, alternative housing development strategies around industrial areas, handling existing housing, increasing access to affordable housing facilities, planning and physical control facilities in anticipation of housing development, and for provision as adequate, affordable, and suitable housing. Okay, that's all for the presentation. I'm sorry for there are many mistakes. Thank you for your attention. And if you are interested in the housing sector, especially slums, here are my rated publication as a reference, hopefully useful. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. I return it to the moderator. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Prof. Sunarti. I think it was a comprehensive presentation. It's also retrieved from your publication, yeah, received late publication. And I would like to point out your presentation that you have described a lot of varieties that were existing in the industrial area of KIP, and also some of the problems you have presented in clear, and also I think it's beneficial for the student to learn on how you recommend a strategy to help overcome the problems. Okay, I think we are now going to the last session of the international lecture series. We have a question and answer session. I have here 3 questions to Chantalle. Okay. The first one from UPI. Chantalle, would you like me to read through the question, or
it's actually
what
okay.
is your
I also wrote them down.
Okay, so basically the question is about law enforcement for the targeted social housing beneficiaries. And, yes?
Yes. So actually this question, yes, I outlined that the social housing is now, I would say, occupied by a lot of people that are actually can find housing in the private rental sector.
Mm-hmm.
But indeed, it doesn't mean that according to the law nowadays, they are eligible. They can live there. Yeah, so it's not against the law. It's just the implementation phase in the first part. It was actually the goal to normalize social housing. So that's why we see this big group of younger, higher income residents in the social housing now. There is an amendment made in 2021 to make the percentage go up to 40. And actually, they aim to increase this percentage again to 50% in the coming year. So they slowly want to increase the percentage of people with a priority status. Yeah, so it's really about making sure that it's accepted as a concept by the Taiwanese society because it's something new. Yeah, so what we see is that I think that is the most important component, that they slowly want to increase it. Yeah, so the law is being changed all the time. Yeah. Is that an answer?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yes, the second one from Dia. I also saw this question, and it's mostly related to the difference between the big city and the small villages, right? So what we see is that in Taipei, the average income is about 55,000 NTD per month. Sorry, I must say the median income, median, it's very big difference. Whereas outside of the 6 big cities in Taiwan, it's much lower. It's about 40,000 NTD per month. So it's easier to achieve affordable rents outside of the city. Affordable property to buy is another story, because housing is so commodified that actually we see a shift towards investments into rural areas, especially also by retirees, people that take holiday homes outside of the city, but also investments in rural areas due to the housing tax being different in different counties. So, for example, the housing tax is slowly increased in Taipei City. So we see that investments are going towards the East Coast, to Ilan, for example, because they have lower housing tax. Yeah, so we see a shift in investments. So in those areas, it's actually, you could say a sort of like gentrification or displacement process happening, where the local youth is competing with Taipei residents that are buying properties for investment. So so the minimum income in between Taipei and the other big cities and then rural areas, there's a huge gap. And for rents, it's definitely possible to find affordable properties in the countryside, but for
Chantalle,
it's a different story.
we lost your voice. Okay, yeah, it's back now.
It's back. Oh, you lost my voice.
Yeah,
Okay.
a couple of minutes ago.
Oh, really? Oh, I'm so sorry. Okay. The question from Ida is about Apriliani, is about, let me see, I would like to ask about the criteria and administrative document required for people, yes, to qualify for the social housing. So actually there is not a lot of rules. The most important one is that people don't own a house in northern Taiwan. And the second one is they have to have their income documents, so we can determine what is the income, in which group are they? Are they in a priority group or are they in the general group? And then they, for certain, let's say, certain social housing units that are dedicated to youth that give back to society, they have to come up with a plan how they want to contribute to society. And we also have the specific extra subsidy for example, married couples. So you don't need a marriage certificate. So that you can show that you're actually married, and then you will have an extra bonus. So actually like a rental subsidy. So it's really, the incentive is not only providing the affordable housing or the adequate housing, but really in combination with this fertility issue.
Yes. So it's quite simple, actually,
Yeah, to sign up is very simple. But actually, the allocation, that's maybe what I should also look at, is so many people want to live here that in certain buildings that are closer to the city center, there are actually like the allocation, like the rate, because it's actually done by lottery if you get in or not, is only about 2%, 2 to 5% of the people that sign up for the housing will actually get to live there. Because there's such a huge demand.
It's quite informative, and I think it's also creative to create instruments to be eligible. So it will foster them to benefit the social housing. I think it's important. Now, before I invite another question from the chat room, I think we have so many questions for you, Chantalle, here. Okay, I will invite online participants to raise questions directly to either Chantalle or Prof. Narti. Is there anyone to raise question directly to the both presenters? Could you please raise your hand?
Yes, okay, Ms. Landung, about There are question, yeah, from student.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes.
There any government subsidy, yeah, to help improve the quality of housing for industrial area? In the case of Kendari, the government has not provided subsidies that focus on industrial housing. Yeah, especially for workers. Yeah. However, the government has provided an initiative to provide affordable housing material that can be asserted by communities around the industrial area. There are subsidies from government. The location for increasing housing, the out from location my research, there are subsidies, but no in this location my research. There are 9 slum, yeah, area in around housing keep, but the government maybe not only just the yeah, not for the infrastructure, not increasing, yeah, not yet. And yeah, this is Mr. Yap Bab. Apakah strategi kebijakan untuk mengatasi kumuh industrial terapkan untuk permukiman liar
Pak Yadi, Bu.
Ya. And strategi kebijakan yang tepat untuk mengatasi squatter. Ya, in this my location, my research, ya, location my research, there's no for these policies, yeah. But there are policies about the condition in the squatter. There are for, yeah, not only for this the program from the government, but except for this location. Yeah, and maybe the program squatter from government not yet formed in the main location. Yeah, maybe there are from in KIP and the Sarprak just know on just only the situation standard in location in KIP area. Okay, this is my answer. Is there any question?
Okay, Prof. Narti. Yes, we have another one
Whether there are any
Chantalle to
financial
you, but to highlight the question from Pak Yadi, so conclusion, the experience.
Yeah.
Sorry, the experience from, okay.
Ms. Landung, the sound you're clear? It's not clear?
Yeah.
Sorry.
Could you please
I think we're losing connection with Landung. Right?
Sorry, from Chantalle?
Yeah.
The question? Yeah. Until now, KIP doesn't have financial contribution, yeah, for housing, because maybe housing provision will be carried in the second phase for the middle up group. Yeah, there are no finance for this from KIP housing. Yeah.
Yeah, because I think we have in Taiwan, for example, but I also know in the Netherlands that we have, for example, if companies start to develop that, they actually ask them to also contribute to places for their workers to live. So I was wondering if that is something that has been done, but that's not the case.
Yeah, This is around a keep.
I'm sorry, I have been signed out from the Zoom. Maybe because of the internal connection, the Wi-Fi from the laboratory was not unstable. I'm so sorry.
Yeah.
To resume the last question from Pak Yan.
Okay, so to Maya, is there a special strategy for the seniors? Yes, Taiwan is a aging society, so we see an increase in seniors, elderly in society. But as the main focus of the government is to increase the fertility rate, elderly are actually not a priority group. Yeah, but we see that elderly are actually profiting tremendously from living in the social housing because of the community activities, the inclusion. So we see that elderly that are actually living in the social housing are not lonely, for example. So the policy is not directed towards them, but we actually see that the elderly in the social housing are really profiting. So it will be some of the policy directions to look into for the government in the future to include elderly as one specific target group. But for now, the elderly are not included.
Yes.
Okay, another question.
Thank you for your answer, Chantalle. We have another question for you.
That's okay. Yeah, how many rooms and how large are the rooms provided for low-income groups with more than 3 dependents in Taiwan? So indeed, it's true. So I showed that we have basically 4 types. We have studio, 1-bedroom apartment, 2-bedroom apartment, and 3-bedroom apartment. So what we see is that we have actually, it depends on how many people are in the apartment. And it basically means that if you are only one, you sign up as one person, you can never get a 3-bedroom apartment. So that's very strict. If you are a single person, you only can get a studio or a 1-bedroom apartment. If you are actually a family with 2 children, then you are 4 persons, so you can apply for the 3-bedroom apartment. The allocation for the different income groups is based on the one hand of what can they afford is the most important issue. So we see that in the 3-bedroom apartments, actually not so many low-income households are there because the apartments are just too expensive for them. So that is one of the directions that the government has to adjust if they want to make sure that low-income people with more children can benefit. So we really see at this moment that the 3-bedroom apartments are occupied by the higher income groups because they're too expensive for the low-income groups to live there.
Thank you for your thorough and detailed answer for all the questions raised to you. And I'm forgot because I was signed out from the Zoom. Have your question been answered by Prof. Narti, Chantalle? Has been answered by Prof. Narti?
Yes.
You have question to Prof. Narti already? Okay. Okay. Yeah. We still have another 10-15 minutes. I would like to invite question from the participants. Maybe you have a direct question to the presenters, or maybe Mbak Lani or Mas Imam, can you help me? Is there any question from the YouTube channel? Because we also live stream this to our YouTube official account. I will ask the committee to check, is there any question on YouTube channel?
No question, Landung.
Okay, there is no question. Is
I
there any
one question actually that was directed only to me? Should I answer that?
Yes, please. Yes, please. Yes.
Yeah, so I received one question from Yadiba. Yeah, I don't know if I pronounced it correctly. Yeah.
Yes.
And the question was, in your opinion, what is the best policy of housing for small cities in Indonesia? So this also relates a little bit to my research in Indonesia, maybe. I think also in relation to Professor Narti's presentation, which you already outlined as well, I think it is indeed also addressing the narrative on what is good housing development. So, for example, the narrative of the densification should maybe addressed in Indonesia, because it's like a lot of sprawl that we see toward, which comes with these increased transportation costs and like difficulty in providing facilities. So I think a development towards densification or mixed use development would be one of the things that I would suggest. Not only in big cities, but also in smaller cities, to more like the concentration of the cities. Also in terms of sustainable development and the transportation related towards, well, urban sprawl. So I think that would be something that I would recommend to take from Taiwan. Yeah.
Yeah. I remember that your introduction sentences was also related to our cases in Indonesia, talking about that sometimes in order to avoid less of having home ownership for the priority groups, and the government built the housing on the less valued land.
Yeah, indeed.
So
yeah.
it creates I will invite the final invitation for those who would like to raise questions, either in chat room or directly to the presenters. Is there any more, maybe from the students? I have here a lot of students from the bachelor and master programs here, also several of them. And we also hear several of the lecturers join with us here. Is there any more question? Okay, maybe I have last question to Prof. Narti. We have almost the same issues on our research project talking about slum, Prof. Narti. Do you think that one of the problems in KIP is because of the educational background of the slum community, that they were not able to respond in innovative and creative way, so that the quality of life in their area could be improved? Prof. Narti, you haven't opened your mic.
Thank you, Ms. Andung, about this condition slum. Based on for this slums, for the recent slum, there are any the debate for housing, housing infrastructure, and no standard in the around location in maybe especially in around Kendal, housing around Kendal. There are maybe in self-help housing, the built for the uniform, and there are mistake for the condition is no good. There are no standard and infrastructure no complete in the run in housing for self-help housing. But in developer housing, there are for this more good than self-help housing. There are the growth for this housing in around industrial park. There are for this for any the program for this area, but not yet for built from government. And then any maybe any program for community, that's for community. And then we for the program for community, from participation, yeah, participation community for build increase housing. And there are if government program in the slum don't just one by one aspect, but they all for the aspect the build for this area, don't just one by one. These are all for this the slum area. Maybe the program can not cannot for this slum again if the community is a participation. But with approach participation, maybe the community sense of belonging for this location. Yeah, maybe this my answer for your Ms. Landung.
Yes, thank you, Prof. Narti. I think we have come to the end of the main session. I would like once again to say deeply gratitude for both presenters. From the point of view of Chantalle, we learned so much about how social housing has been implemented as part of the solution to combat for the increase of home ownership in Taiwan. She mentioned about in total I'm sorry if I mistake, 80% Chantalle per se for the home ownership
80%, yeah.
80% is quite high, and the government has implemented national to local government policy and implemented, even though from the research has been done by Chantalle, some of it is not successfully. Some of it is still received by untargeted groups. You mentioned so much about the general groups, not the priority groups. And then from the point of view of Prof. Narti in researching to industrial area housing in Kendal Regency, we learned so much that there are several existing problems related with the infrastructure provisions, and also lack of the commitment from the government, and maybe also several of the response as sectors, but still the problem that was implemented still incrementally. So we should look at the comprehensive perspective that housing should be seen as a part to help community in improving their welfare and quality of life. Thank you very much once again, and I would like to hand over the session to the Master of Ceremony. Ririn, the time is yours.
Thank you, Ms. Chantalle, Elisabeth Rietdijk, Ph.D., and Professor Dr. Sunarti. It was such an inspiring and fruitful discussion we have here today. And also thank you, Ibu Landung, for moderating the main session. Before we close this event, we would like to say thank you for the support from the honorable guest lecturer. It's been an honor to have with us here this morning. For documentation purpose, I invite all participants to open the camera. We will have photo sessions now. Maybe I will wait until 11 for prepare yourself. Okay, I will take the screenshot from here. 3, 2, 1. Okay, once again. 3, 2, 1. Okay, and this event about to come to the very end. I hope you found the presentation today are informative and helpful, and we hope that this event will bring an inspiration and the positive impact for all of us. For those who would like to hear again this international lecture series, please kindly check our YouTube channel at PWK Undip TV Official. Please forgive us for our shortcomings. We look forward to seeing you to the next international lecture series. I hope all of you have a good day. Thank you. Good afternoon and wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Chantalle.
Thank you, everyone. It was really nice.
I waiting for you in Semarang, Chantalle.
Yes, I'm looking forward.